Aaron, it's good evening from the UK. I'm guessing, is it the afternoon in your neck of the woods?
That's right. Yep. About two in the afternoon.
Well, Aaron, as you know, well, some of my listeners will know, I go on Clubhouse, and occasionally I hear someone speak, and I think, they're good. They're really good. And I heard you speak, and I thought, he's really good. So obviously we reached out to each other. And so it's brilliant to have you on board. And I'll tell you what struck me and why I wanted you to speak to me on the podcast is we've just had the end of what we call the Euros 2020, which is a soccer competition.
Yes.
And it's all about teams. And you know, we all sit back and think about, well, why did one team not succeed and why did one get to a final, not quite there, or didn't get. So I'm always fascinated by performance and teams. And when I heard that you're a brilliant title, by the way, that you're a culture engineer, and we'll chat about that later. You're an expert and you help businesses understand how to build teams, how to increase their performance. And you've got, and we may not have time, but you've got 8 principles of teamification, which is interesting. And then, of course, I'll kick off with this comment. 95% of workers believe 2 things lead to poor teams. One is poor communication, and the other one is misalignment amongst co-workers. So let me kick off with the first question, which is, what is a team? Because Ken Blanchard said, none of us is smart than all of us. So what is a team? Why is a team important? Why is team important?
I love the question. What is a team? And I don't know that anybody's ever asked me that exactly. So I think of a team as a group of people making a coordinated effort to accomplish a common goal. Okay. And why is a team important? I think it's an African proverb that's been getting a lot of play lately. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Yeah. So, I mean, we can certainly all experience that we have gifts and limitations. I have gifts and limitations. You have gifts and limitations. Our listener right now has gifts and limitations. And if nothing else, and this is just the beginning, if nothing else, a team can compensate for one another's limitations with their own gifts. Because where I have limitations, other people have gifts. And I don't understand those folks exactly, but I sure as heck love them. So that's the simplest answer. I think a slightly more nuanced and sophisticated answer is in that Ken Blanchard quote that you just named of none of us is smarter than all of us. And in theater improvisation, there's an idea that the answer to the problem, right, whatever the problem is, the answer is not in you and the answer is not in me. The answer is between us. So
if I think it's a great explanation. If teams are so important, Aaron, and I don't know about the States, but I could just tell you in the UK, other than sports, I don't think we're taught to work in teams. So as children, we're not and maybe at home, depending how many children there are in the house, they might say, look, you've all got to work together. But if teams are so important, why do they not teach how to work with other people in teams at schools? And I'm talking about the UK. I don't know what it's like in the US.
I don't know why. I certainly agree with the implication that you're making that it's a lost opportunity and an important one. People say in this country, and I don't know whether they're correct, that they say that schools have been designed to create good factory workers. Right? There's the bell, right? We're being conditioned by our school to be in our right spot before the bell, to stay in our right spot until the bell, to take in information and by rote put that information back out. And I suppose arguably that could make for a good assembly line worker. So if I had to guess at why we're not taught how to team in schools, it would my best guess would be that this industrial age educational system was designed for a kind of thinking that for example, led Chrysler to lose out to Toyota in the 80s, right? And there's a different way that Toyota looks at a factory worker,
right,
that is much more team-oriented than the way we have traditionally looked at it. And they crushed the American car makers in the 80s. And so even the reason that I imagine schools don't teach teaming is a poor reason.
So absolutely. So you walk into businesses and companies, and your mission, should you wish to take it, your mission is to sort out the team. So how can you tell, and can you tell, by the way, as you enter whatever it is, that actually that team is dysfunctional? And if you can tell it's dysfunctional, how can you tell when something is high performing? So, to be able to tell the one, you've got to be able to tell the other. Does that make sense? So can you tell? Can you walk in and think, actually, because it is this and this, it is dysfunctional, this team?
When a team is functioning pretty well, it's hard for it takes a while for me to tell. And
okay,
the answer is yes, I can tell. Over years, Ninder, I have trained myself to see the matrix of team dynamics, the matrix of interpersonal dynamics in a company. And as a customer, when I call a company, I can often tell within the first few seconds whether the culture is essentially healthy or essentially unhealthy. There's a restaurant chain on the west coast of the U.S. called In-N-Out Burger. It's very famous, and people love it, right? There are lots of people who go to McDonald's, right? It's a fast food. There are lots of people who go. McDonald's, as far as I can tell, does not have rabid fans. In-N-Out Burger has rabid fans because as soon as you walk into this place, you see and you hear the employees. You see the cleanliness, right? The cleanliness is an indication. The smiles on people's faces is an indication. The people who are working there are not all smiles all the time, but there's a lot of smiling going on compared to any other fast food joint, right? And they're moving with purpose, and they're moving with energy and intention, and they are moving usually in a well-coordinated fashion. And just watching them move and communicate together, you get a sense for the culture. And I think about a tech company here in Bellevue, Washington, that I walked into, and there was nobody sitting at the reception desk. And I was there for 3 minutes before the receptionist came back, and two different people who were going about their busy work lives in this high-performing tech company came up to me with genuine warmth and offered me water, right? That's a matter of culture. That's a matter of the team seeing that the receptionist isn't there and not recognizing me, knowing that there's a guest that deserves the care of the company. And so they stepped in to fill that gap. As a matter of course. They didn't think about it. They weren't begrudging about it. It was a matter of course. Just like when you're watching baseball and if the second baseman misses a ground ball, then the shortstop is right there behind to catch it. And it turns out the shortstop is right there behind to catch it, even if the second baseman does catch the ball. The shortstop is there to back them up because that's how we operate on this field. And so you can feel that. You can feel that in a company.
So you said it's harder to spot a good team, but you can spot a dodgy one quite quickly. So typically then, if you can spot a dysfunctional team, what are the things behind it that lead it to be dysfunctional? So what are the type of things you spot or have spotted or have understood over time to be the main components behind a dysfunctional team? You've given us one where you know it's working well because the customer experience is so great. But when you go in there, so typically what are the reasons that you might get a dysfunctional team? What are the reasons?
The trite but true answer is that it always comes down to leadership. I can think of, for example, a business leader who was relatively new in her job at the head of this company. She'd been there for 18 months, long enough to become frustrated that there was a culture of non-accountability. And so she called me and she said, in my 18 months here, I've hired lots of people who have accountability in their resume, right? It's visible in their resume. They have a reputation for accountability, and they come here and they're not accountable. And I don't understand what's happening. So I said, why don't I come in and we can talk about this? And so I pulled into the parking lot, and the first thing that I saw as I parked in the parking lot was a big red and white sign. And it said, "We are not responsible for theft or damage." And you may know that the U.S. is kind of a litigious culture. So
yes, I've heard.
What her predecessor had done had seen this threatening world in which people who come into the parking lot are a potential danger to the company, because if somebody breaks into their car, they might sue the company, because people do that kind of thing. So the first message that anyone gets is, this is a dangerous place.
Yeah.
You are on your own. We do not have your back. And by the way, if there's ever any gray area about who's responsible for what, we lean away from responsibility. That's the culture here. Those four messages in that one sign. So this is what I mean when I say, this is part of what I mean when I say I can see the matrix. So in 30 seconds, pulling into the parking lot, I thought, okay, I have a pretty good idea of what's going on here. In the break room, there are also signs that, there's just this undercurrent of mistrust. And in the HR policies, the employee handbook, there are these undercurrents of employees have to be managed in order to limit the liability that they can bring to this company. Not that that's false any more than the sign in the parking lot is false. And what Simon Sinek does in his book, Leaders Eat Last, is he lays out an incredibly well put together argument that the human brain cannot put the interests of the company ahead of their own until and unless they believe that they are really well supported. And so in a platoon, there are stories that come back from the Vietnam War, for example, where a platoon's walking along and somebody lobs a grenade at the platoon, and one of the soldiers throws himself on the grenade to save the rest of the team. That can only happen in a culture where everybody feels it in their bones that my team has my back. It can only happen in a culture where biochemically you've been convinced I don't have to look after my own interests because other people are covering my interests. And so all I have to do is cover the interests of the team. And so that was a long answer to a short question. I hope it's useful.
No, that's fine. So let's drill into that. Let's drill into that then. So are you saying the fact that people don't feel they've got their backs covered is that the leader's fault, or is that the makeup of the group around them? In other words, the people who are around with them, despite the leader, they don't believe their back's covered.
So part of my answer would be to say, Ninder, where did the rest of the team come from? How did they get there? Why did they stay there? Right? The leader's are the one making the hiring and firing decisions. So that's part of it. Right? Second is people behave in the ways that they're rewarded to behave. It's a thing that happens. And so when it comes to culture, you really have to kind of look under the bonnet and figure out what kinds of behaviors are rewarded around here. Are people looking out for themselves rewarded? In a lot of companies, they are. On a lot of sales teams, I mean, and sales is the easiest place to pick on, so pardon me, folks. And it's true that you can look at sales teams and see that they're more often than not rewarded for individual performance, which in fact could potentially be enhanced by a certain dog-eat-dog relationship with the people on the same sales team. And I've worked in a number of different restaurants, for example, as a server. And there have been places where there's essentially a competition for the best tables, where people, perhaps not literally, will shove each other out of the way in order to get ahead and get more tips. And I've worked in places where people will potentially give up some tips because, say, for example, I'm not going to give my table the stellar service that I could give them because my colleague over here needs a hand. And they're doing okay. And I might not wow them, but I'll at least impress them. Meanwhile, she's floundering over here and needs some help. And people from all directions will come to their aid. That's not only about hiring good people, although that's a component of it. It's also about what gets rewarded and in what ways, what gets recognized.
Let me take that further then.
Yeah.
I appreciate what you're saying there, but we have to accept that people have different talents, different abilities. Some are better than others. So how do you manage a team then where you got some clear talent, maybe let's say creative talent? It could be in sport, you have that superb player. But the team needs the player, and the player knows that, and could become, I wouldn't say disruptive or negative power, but how do you manage a player like that, retain them, yet at the same time retain the harmony of the group? Does that make sense? So yes. Almost it's a bit of a dilemma. You don't want to lose this person who's really good, but at the same time, they know, the team knows, and it just causes that the team maybe not be able to optimize performance because they know he's seen as special, he or she.
So if I understand your question correctly, you're asking about, are you asking about jealousy?
No, I'm asking how do you manage a team like that? How do you, as a leader, recognize that in your group of people you have some really talented people, some not so talented, and it can cause that friction, and maybe the talented person gets away with a few things here or there because actually you just need them, and the other people then start thinking, well, this is a bit. So how do you maintain creative talent in a team where there's differing abilities?
It's hard, and this is one of the things I think we've been learning in this COVID environment, is that good enough management really just isn't good enough anymore. Good enough management might be everybody's, is everybody at their desks? People asked me at the beginning of all this when they sent their teams home, how do I know I'm getting my 40 hours worth?
Yeah.
Wrong question.
Yeah.
what do you need from person X this week? What do you need from person Y this week? Not the inputs, the outputs.
Yeah.
And that's what we need to measure. So how do you manage it? Well, I'm sorry to keep coming back to sports analogies, and particularly U.S. sports analogies, but they're just so incredibly useful. Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan were on the Bulls at the same time, and I'm not a sports fan, by the way, right? Yeah. I just happen to see the value of these comparisons. Scottie Pippen is a much less recognized name than Michael Jordan. And Scottie Pippen on any other team would have been the star. And what Scottie Pippen and Michael Jordan and their coach all recognized was that essentially the name of the game is get Michael the ball. And Scottie Pippen also did that incredibly well. So on another team, Scottie Pippen might have been an incredibly high scoring player. On this team, he was an incredibly high assisting player, because that's what's going to get us to the win.
Yeah.
A manager who knows his team or her team will keep digging in to know with greater and greater detail about the strengths and weaknesses of the people on their team. And instead of thinking, okay, everybody's got to deliver 5 widgets this week, right? And you've got 5 people on your team. Everybody's got to deliver 5. So you've got some people delivering 3. You've got some people delivering 4. You've got some people delivering 5, and then they're done and they're bored and they're twiddling their thumbs. Or you can figure out, okay, this person is really good at this and this person is really good at this, and we can actually kind of, in a way, create an assembly line where everybody is just fitting together just so that we are incredibly effective together. It's not an individual KPI, it's a team KPI. And when the one more thing that I'll say about that is that when people at the rock face, when the front line has decision-making authority, because I know you're going to be asking me about how to be responsive and agile.
Yeah.
When the people at the rock face have decision-making authority, they can do these little make these little micro adjustments in the moment together to deliver. And when you align everybody's interests so that we all win when the widgets get delivered, then people will do it. And they'll do it happily. And they'll pass the ball to Michael Jordan so he can put the ball in the net.
And how do you avoid, and this is, I suppose it can come to recruitment, but how do you avoid groupthink where the team is so inward looking? Part of the problem is it becomes inward looking, it becomes complacent, and there's no challenge, and they don't send anything to the manager or the team leader or whoever it is. How do you avoid groupthink? How do you walk into a place and say, I can see groupthink here, there, this is the problem here. That's why there's no innovation.
That is such an important question. And there's no one answer. I'll tell you a couple of the ways that you can do it wrong. One is I talk often about conventional unwisdom. There's a lot of supposed conventional wisdom out there that's really terrible. One of the pieces of conventional unwisdom that I hear a lot is from leaders: don't bring me a problem unless you've got a solution.
Yeah.
That is a surefire way.
Hit it all the time.
That is a surefire way to ensure that all the problems are going to bite you in the butt. Because if they were easy problems that your people had the solutions to, then they wouldn't be problems. They'd be solved. They'd be non-problems. So leaders say to me, like, why did I not hear about this sooner? And I say, well, have you ever said, if you don't bring me a problem unless you have a solution? Well, yeah, of course, because I don't want people to come and whine at me. Well, so you wonder why you didn't hear about this problem. It's because nobody had a solution for it, so they kept it to themselves. Reward people bringing problems to you. That all by itself, that one behavior is worthy of a reward.
I think that's a brilliant point, because I do hear that. So really, you should have an open culture where people should be encouraged to bring you problems, because then you know there's problems, and that's when you can resolve them. If there's no problems, your ship's sailing away and you have no idea.
Absolutely. Hey, boss, the warehouse is on fire. It's going to be 10 minutes before the fire department gets here. You want me to keep that to myself because I don't know what to do about it? I don't. I wouldn't want somebody to keep that, right? I mean, I might have ideas. We could bring it to the group as a whole. You know, even if it takes us 5 minutes to discuss what to do about this, that's still 5 minutes more of action that's happening on this fire before the fire department arrives. And of course, I'm just using that as an analogy. And it's a remarkably apt analogy. We're losing market share. Yeah. Boss, hey, we're losing market share. Do you have a solution? No? Then go away. Are you kidding me?
It is a much played.
Thank you so much for telling me. Right? And you want to let people know in advance, hey, I know that there's this conventional wisdom out there. If you don't have a solution, do not bring me a problem. Tell your team, I do not subscribe to that. If you come to me with a problem that you don't have a solution for, I will say thank you.
So talking about recruitment, because you said earlier, if it's a problem, you know, who recruited them. Now, there's a chap called Ricardo Semler, Brazilian chap, and he felt the people who should do the recruitment shouldn't be the managers or the leaders. It should be the team members, because that's who they work with. And he said, let the team members also set the salary. And the reason you do that is because they've got a target to hit. If they pay the people too much, they're going to lose. They'll be out of a job. So when it comes to recruitment, and managers move on and go for, you know, and sort of move on, another manager comes in. Is this where the problem lies, that organizationally the wrong people are recruiting, and therefore the people who have been forced to work with them are not of their choosing? It's been chosen because their manager thinks they're a good fit, and that's where the problems start. Is that plausible? Is that plausible?
I would say it's a multifaceted problem, and I think that definitely contributes. I also think that hiring is not a one-person job.
Yeah.
Right. So should it be the team instead of the manager? I don't know. I do know that I advise my clients to bring in multiple people into the decision-making process. Not for panel interviews, but get as much contact with a prospective hire as possible. Get as many voices into the decision-making process as possible. Also, have a clear process about how the decision is going to be made. It's not a democracy. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be unanimous, as long as you have a well-understood system that brings in multiple voices. You're moving along pretty well. The other thing that I'd say about it, I think, is that interviews are notoriously terrible predictors of future performance. And so I think there's too much kind of one or two interviews that happen. I think there is too much, we need to fill this chair, so let's get somebody into it, when the company and the team would have done better if everybody had just had to grin and bear the fact that that seat was empty a little bit longer, or even a lot longer, because we hadn't found the right person. There's almost nothing worse you can do to your company than put the wrong person into it.
They say sometimes that when there's a dysfunctional team, when there's a dysfunctional business, then the immediate word that comes to play, we need to change. We need to introduce a change management program. We need to change all of this. And of course, some consultants have thrived on being able to walk in and say, we will change cultures. We know how to manage change. But you're not a fan of change management. Is that right? And if not, why not? Because everybody else seems to think that's the thing to do. Bring in some consultants and let's go into change management.
You're right and you're not right about my thoughts about change management. In the particular scenario that you describe, there's some change to manage, without question. I was talking to a CEO this morning who, over a decade ago, made 2 different acquisitions. So now instead of having one company, he's got 3 merged companies, essentially.
Yep.
And he's now dealing, over a decade later, still with the resentment that happened at that time. He's still got some people from the original team who create resistance and drama.
Yeah.
And what he said was, I know I should have handled this a long time ago. Right? Right now, almost, more than 10 years later, there is a change to manage. Had he had the leadership chops at the time that are available, he would have made some quick, hard decisions and simply done some change. But now, there's so much yarn wrapped up around this knot that there is some change management that is needed. Because you can't just snap your fingers and everything's healed. The other thing that I think about change management is that it keeps putting into people's minds the fact, and I put fact in quotes, the fact that change is hard, that people are going to resist change.
Yep.
That this is going to take a long time, whatever this is. And so they give people permission to be immature saboteurs. By saying we need to manage this change, you're saying, go ahead, we expect it. And if nothing else, COVID taught us that our belief that we're in a stable environment, our belief that essentially, we can look into the future, we can see where things are going, we can create a plan and manage that plan for change. It's an illusion. What you need from your team is change readiness. If you look even now, right, the CDC here in the States is coming out with new guidance about COVID because of the Delta variant.
Yeah.
3 weeks ago, people were talking about we're in the post-COVID era. Well, now they're having to wind that back. It's not post-COVID yet. And everybody's talking about how do we plan for the future? Do we keep our offices? Do we not keep our offices? Do we go hybrid? Do we stay remote? Do we require everybody to come back to the office? The only answer with any wisdom is, let's try something. Let's pick one and try it. We'll see how it goes. COVID is going to keep changing. The market is going to change. We have no clue. So we have to make our best guess of what to do. And hey, by the way, folks, this is what we're doing this week. And I know it's uncomfortable to be in the unknown. and I'm not going to pretend for you that we know. So be ready. Right? Change readiness is so much more valuable than change management. Give me a team that's ready for change, that's ready to try stuff, that's ready to iterate and learn and try something else. If you give me a choice between that team and a team that's been told, hey folks, change is going to be hard and it's going to take a long time, but here's our plan, and I've got to accomplish X, I will take the change ready team every day of the week.
And do you think the fact that people are now working remotely, does that make it easier or harder? And I'll tell you why I say that. It's easier because suddenly politics are out. Nobody's going to say he said, she said, he said, because they're all at home now. But
they do.
Oh, do they? Okay.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of that.
Okay. I'm wrong there. Okay. So what should leaders do to still be nimble and responsive during a virtual team? So that if you're running people virtually, how does a leader continue to be nimble and responsive? Because they're all virtual. They're all, you can't get them in a room together.
We could do a really long episode on that alone. And there are, I think, 3 really important meetings that every manager should be having. One is a daily stand-up meeting with the team to answer a few questions. 1, what is each person aiming to accomplish in the next 24 to 48 hours? 2, what obstacles does each person see between them and that 24 to 48 hour goal? And that's a short-term goal, right? 24 to 48 hours. And then lastly, how can we help each other? How can we help each other level those obstacles? Who's got untapped resource, right? Whether it's time or something else that can help somebody else level those obstacles. So that's one meeting. Second meeting is the manager's one-on-one meeting with their direct reports. Once a week, 30 minutes, starting with whatever the direct report wants to talk about, and then moving into whatever the manager wants to talk about. The purpose of this meeting is to build the relationship. A secondary outcome will be managing tasks and deliverables and things like that. The third type of meeting, and this is one that I don't hear other people recommending, is that once a month, or at most once a quarter, a meeting between the manager and every single direct report in which the manager says, you are meeting my expectations. Here's where I'd like you to continue to grow. You're not meeting my expectations. Here's why. Here's the size of the gap, and here's how and when I need you to close that gap. You're exceeding my expectations. Or, right, you're giving them an honest sense of where they stand. And this needed to be happening all along, but especially when somebody is sitting in their home with this Zoom filter, right? I mean, I'm seeing your face, Ninder. I'm getting some of your expressions, some of your body language, some of your nonverbal communication or your sub-vocalizations. Well, we're getting a lot less than we used to.
Yeah.
And I would rather know, hey, Aaron, and I'm not alone in this. Hey, Aaron, you're not meeting my expectations, and here's the gap. Then wonder whether or not I'm meeting expectations. There are thousands upon thousands of people right now sitting at home. Some of them are sitting in the office, and they do not know whether they are doing fine, doing great, or on the verge potentially of being fired. And that anxiety really harms their performance.
Interesting. So that's very interesting insight. So almost what you're saying, it's interesting, is do you think because of COVID, leading teams has changed from being direction focused, you're doing A, B, C, and D, to now saying more of a coaching perspective, because certainly the mental thing has come into it. It's no longer just about the job, but there's the, how does a person feel? A bit like a coach would be, you gave those examples earlier about understanding deeply each person, and you gave the Michael Jordan and the other fellow the difference because the coach knew deeply. Is that where we're going wrong in business? Is that we're too, direction-led? You got to do A, B, C, D, and E, and I'll see you at the end of the week, rather than really getting to that coach. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are a few pieces of this. One is, you asked if COVID changed that, like changed what makes for a good leadership. I don't think so. What I think it's done is it's stretched out the results that you can get on that spectrum, so that great leadership looks the same as it ever did. Terrible leadership looks the same as it ever did. And each increment along that spectrum creates a wider and wider gap in performance because of COVID and because of being remote. Right? So it's the consequences of being a 4 out of 5 instead of a 5 as a leader are bigger than they used to be. The consequences of being a 3 out of 5 are bigger than they used to be. So it's amplified the consequences. And then as far as directive, like you're talking about, do this, that, and the other thing, it's always been incredibly effective leadership to share the vision, to share the goal, to delegate the outcome that we're looking for, as opposed to the step-by-step, right? And even when somebody doesn't yet have the skill to navigate between here and the vision, it still is going to be a matter of, here's the outcome we're getting to. And then as you brought up the word coaching, what are your thoughts about how to get there? Get their minds actively engaged with the problem. Even if you know you're going to end up having to say, okay, here's what I want you to do. I want you to do A, then B, then C, then D. And that's going to take you to E, which is our destination. Then I asked them, how did that go? How did it go getting from A to B? How did it go getting from B to C? How did it go getting from C to D? And I know there are all these leaders right now listening to me thinking, I don't have time for that. It's an investment. Short term, yeah, it seems awfully difficult. Long term, how do you think you got the kind of judgment that you have? You got it by operating that puzzle. You got it by engaging with that question, by engaging with that process. And so you're, in the long run, Liz Wiseman has this fantastic book called Multipliers. And one of the things that she says in this book is that the most valuable person in a company is not the genius, but the genius maker. And nice. What I'm talking about is one of the processes for making a genius.
Yeah, I like that. Right, look, I know you've got now 2 minutes. Well, we've got 4, but you've got a dash in 2 minutes. So you've got 2 minutes to answer this question. So COVID's still with us, although we can see a bit of a roadmap. The world is changing at a rapid pace. Digitalization is just changing everything. Hybrid working is changing everything. A business will be measured by its ability to adapt, ability to progress. How do you continue in these really difficult times to get your teams and the companies within which they reside becoming more innovative? And you've got about 2 minutes, my friend.
We have a whole kind of 5 principle system for creating an innovation culture. One of the things that I'll say is, innovation is not something that you do. It's something that happens when the conditions are right. If you want to give your team writer's block so that they can't innovate, tell them, hey, go be innovative, go innovate. And what happens is people's minds go blank because the executive part of your brain is an editor. It's not a creator. Instead, say, hey, folks, let's be really sensitive to problems. I want to hear about problems. I want you to notice problems. I want you to think about problems. I want you to bring up problems. And that's the beginning. Being a problem-finding organization is the beginning of being an innovation organization. If you're the first one to find it, you might be the first one to solve it.
Now, time is up. I'm going to go and have a cup of tea. Then I'm going to go and search Clubhouse for more Aarons, because you've been brilliant. And in fact, I had lots more questions. I told you I had about 18 questions. We've run out of time. But I am going to grab you in a few months, and I'm going to get you back on board. And I've got some other intricate questions to ask around leadership and teamwork. And maybe we'll do it just as COVID is out. We'll see where we are with hybrid. And when we say we will see where the world is.
Yeah.
And maybe I can call the company culture engineer back in for part 2.
Wonderful. I would love to.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Have a great day doing what you're going to do. I'm going to have a cup of tea, and I'm going to go back to Clubhouse to find more people like you to interview.
You've been brilliant too, Ninder. Thank you so much for such engaging and really important questions.
You've been fantastic. Listen, go and have a great day, and I'll catch up with you soon, either on Clubhouse or back on my podcast. Thanks, Aaron.
All right, terrific. Have a great evening.